2010. Dickens said it best. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was exhilarating and it was exhausting. It was surprisingly silly and shockingly sad. It was awesome and it was mundane. It was friendships interrupted and interrupted friendships restarted. In fact, it was just a bit like life. So, as 2011 gets underway, I'd like to share a few of the amusements and some of the non-amusements that made 2010 the year it was. Started off with a bang-up trip to Buenos Aires. Highlights including, being invited into people's homes, waking up out of a dream that was taking place in Spanish. Met some expats that were actually able to live there and make it work. We were remembered by some of the waiters at some of our favorite eating places, always a treat. We took a little trip out of Buenos Aires for a couple days of peace and quiet at a working estancia, it was just nice not to hear the buses and everything about the 14 million people that live in Buenos Aires around you for a couple of days. That was wonderful. Of course, there was also lots of time with Donald, which is, who could ask for anything better than that? And of course, accompanying that is all the wonderful eats and drinks. The sad part about that journey was the interruption, the malfunction, the derailment, I don't know what to call it, that occurred with my friend Judith and I. I'm not sure why the air became so thick that I was unable to speak to her, but that's what happened. Maybe someday we'll figure out why. I spent the rest of the winter in Tucson. There's hardly a better place to be in the winter than Tucson. This year in particular, the desert was green as nobody had ever seen it. The winter nights there are fireplaces, the winter days there are bright sun and Tanque Verde Falls. The dry desert air is filled with the scent of orange blossoms and jasmine. This is really a treat. I'm usually in Tucson at that time of year to do all my doctor visitations, and they all pronounced me good, and nobody even said for your age, which is very satisfying. The apparently delightful life that Kevin and Walter and I were sharing between their two exquisite homes in the desert outside of Tucson came to a crashing halt one night when Kevin made it abundantly clear that he'd had more than enough. So there was two friendships, seemingly lifelong, that had derailed or malfunctioned or something. The year wasn't even half over. So, don't ever take anything for granted, boys and girls. I stayed in Tucson a little while longer and took a couple trips up to Garlandia, a couple of them to visit with Jane, once with her mother and once with her husband Dave. One of those trips, Jane brought with her a quilt that she'd made for me out of old t-shirts, some going back into the 70s. So, it's a beautiful work of art that provides a lot of comfort and some great dreams. Once the heat got on, I headed northeast and did a little quick stop in Chicago for all the good stuff there, which is family and friends, and then slowly made my way over to Art's Place on the coast of Maine, which I've been able to be at for several summers now, and can't imagine anything more lovely. Lots of great social events take place there. The season kind of starts off with a party that Katie and Carl and Art and Paul hold on the porch, called the Porch Party, not surprisingly. Everybody has a glass of wine and talks about what went on in the winter, where their children are, what they're up to, and all that kind of stuff. Shortly thereafter is the tricycle-led 4th of July parade, which goes past Joe and Penny's house, where they're serving breakfast to the community of friends and neighbors that are there. There's barbecues on the porch at the yacht club, and lots of dinners served at Art's house, where I did a lot of the cooking and serving and entertaining. Had a lot of fun. One of the other highlights of Art's location there is the porch itself, whether it's sitting on the porch with the morning coffee, watching the fog lift, or whether it's underneath the aforementioned quilt on the glider in the afternoon sun and cool breeze, with the unbelievable, unendingly changing, perfect maritime landscape out in front. You could spend the whole summer there on the porch, and I spent a lot of the summer there. Yes, indeed I did. I took a couple trips away from there while I was enjoying the time there. I went to Vermont. Bittersweet time in a way. Helped my friend Sid get his house ready to sell. This is a house he inherited from Uncle Fred, and Uncle Fred was a good friend of mine and an angel in my life in the 70s. So I can sort of trace a whole track of my life back to that time. And I'll be sad to see the house go. Yes, indeed I will. I also took a wonderful trip down to Washington, D.C., where my friends Joe and Tom got married at the National Cathedral in just an amazing fashion. I've chronicled that already with a YouTube posting and a Facebook listing and all that kind of stuff, so I won't bother to say anything more than to say that it was awesome. Awesome. Whew. The non-wedding highlight of that trip was reconnecting with my friend Bob Brink. We had been good buddies in grade school and high school and, gone our separate ways in college and beyond, and hadn't really connected at all since then, except that recently through Facebook we got back in touch. And when I was in D.C. I got to see him and reconnect, and what a treat. A real highlight of the year for me. He came up to Maine a little later and we spent a couple more days and on. So that was a restart of a friendship that was just wonderful for me for the year. The longest trip away was sponsored by the Sears Auto Center. They had a contest. I submitted a video. They selected me and gave me some money to fix my car up and gave me some money to spend. Jane and I were the team. We met and we did a week-long journey from Myrtle Beach to Key West, Florida, and had a great time all the way along the way. The absolute highlight of that was another friendship restarted, rekindled, or whatever, with John and Nina Trench. Nina, alas, has died since then, but John and Nina were Barry's parents. Barry was one of the wacky and delightful people that was part of my life in the 70s and 80s. And I still miss him. Great guy. And his parents are wonderful and were then and are now. John's one of those people, he's learned a lot from life, and his recent email said to me something to the effect of there's sort of a thin line between tears and laughter. I choose laughter. Pretty good line. I'm going to just look at my notes now. Summer in New England came to a gradual close, the way it does, with the nights cooling off and the leaves turning color. This year was spectacularly beautiful in Maine, unlike anything I'd seen there. Following that was the drive from Maine down to Raleigh, which was dangerously beautiful all the way. Just every 5 miles, something to stop and take pictures of or look at instead of looking at the traffic in front of you. Anyway, it was beautiful. I've been mostly in the Triangle area since then, although I took a couple trips out from here as well. I went up to D.C. for the Rally to Restore Sanity and or Fear. I gotta say, every time I go to D.C. I like it more. What an amazing place, and especially when you're surrounded by 200,000 or 300,000 like-minded people who are just there to enjoy it. I also took the trip that I love to take every year to Chicago for Thanksgiving. Gee, between the biological family that I have there and the wonderful friends that are there, it's a blessing. It's something to be thankful for. I'm really lucky that I get to do it. What else do I want to say? Well, I could close with maybe a little listing of some of the books I've read. I've got them written down here, so you'll excuse me if I look at them. The Napoleon of Crime, describing a very weird criminal and kind of a fun story. Plato's Symposium, check it out. Short Stories of Saki, I'm still laughing about stuff from that. Jeeves and Wooster, how could you ever stop laughing from that? When the Going Was Good, which is Evelyn Waugh's travel journeys, journals rather, from the 30s into Africa, Ethiopia, when Haile Selassie was being installed, etc. Longitude, where we finally figured out how to figure out where we are on the planet as we traveled on the oceans from one place to another. Letters from the Earth is Mark Twain's satirical letters from Satan to the other angels describing his experience on Earth. Pickwick Papers, Dickens, unbelievable. It's just unbelievable, that's all I can say. Prater Violet is Christopher Isherwood's 1930s fictionalized description of his work in Hollywood during that time, and a wonderful read. And I'm just finishing up Edward Trincomb's Nose, which, while not well written, is kind of a fun story that combines a love of cheese with a history of everything Greek, Turkish, and Constantinopolish from 300 years ago till today. I posted a couple of YouTube videos that I think are pretty good. One is of Joe and Tom's wedding. Check it out. The other one, I made a short video for the It Gets Better project. It's a very interesting experience to talk about a life that's been really blessed in the course of trying to talk to people who are suffering, who are in pain. It was revelatory for me, and I hope helpful for somebody else. The high culture highlight of the year, absolutely the finally getting around to attending the HD simulcasts from the Metropolitan Opera. I've seen a couple of them. I can't recommend it highly enough. If you like to be entertained, if you like to be amazed, if you like to be bowled over, just go. It's wonderful. I guess I'll close it with that, and wish everybody a fantastic 2011. Hope it's the best one yet, and that the next one's better than that.